It is officially August, which means it is officially the month that Taylor Swift invented. Folklore is folkloring, and it is also officially Women in Translation Month. This is an annual occurrence where book lovers and readers are encouraged to read books written by women that have been translated into their native language. The translator or translators do not have to be women, but the original source material, the original author must be a woman. And I love things like this because it's just a great chance, an opportunity to check yourself and check what you're reading and if you are reading enough diverse literature. And so I have got this stack of books to recommend to you. These are all translated works of fiction written originally by women, and they are magical and wonderful, and you should read them. And this month is the perfect opportunity to do so. Before I start talking though about my book recommendations, I wanted to recommend another video and a channel really on YouTube, and that is Books and Bow. I talk about their channel all the time. It's one of my favorites on YouTube. I watch every single video, and they read a lot of translated fiction, and so I would really recommend checking out Books and Bow. I will link their channel down below. They made a wonderful video with new releases, contemporary releases from the last year that were originally written by women but translated into English. Mine are not all from this year. I think most of them I've read in the last year or 2 years, but there's a mix of recent releases and books that were released a little while ago. So if you're looking for some really exciting, contemporary, very, very current women in translation, I would definitely check out the video that was made by Books and Bow. And I just love their channel. They're one of my favorite creators on the platform. They make amazing reviews, and I get so many of my book recs from their channel. So just wanted to highlight that as well. But for now, let's dive into these books. Firstly, I think this is the one I read most recently. This is Greek Lessons by Han Kang. Now, Han Kang is a titan in the Korean literary space. She also wrote The Vegetarian and Human Acts. Such an interesting author, someone who is an instant buy for me. As soon as I see that she's released a new book, I instantly want to go to the store and put it in my basket, take it home and read it. I was very, very fortunate to get to see her do a talk at the Strand with a translator, which was just such a special experience. This was translated by Deborah Smith and Emily Ye Won. And Greek Lessons follows two people. One is a man who is losing his vision, losing his sight. He is a Greek professor, and then the other character we follow is one of his students, and she is mute. She's not speaking. And taking away the sense of sight and the outlet of speech for different characters is so fascinating. It's really interesting to see how they communicate, how they understand each other, how they interact, and the writing is just magical. It's such a sensory experience. Every sentence is so carefully crafted. Definitely one of those like no plot, just vibes books, but I really, really loved it. Another instant by author for me is Mieko Kawakami. Mieko Kawakami is an absolute powerhouse in the Japanese literary landscape. I would recommend any of her books. This was just the closest one I had to hand. She's written Heaven, Breasts and Eggs, and All the Lovers in the Night, as well as a kind of novella short story called Miss Ice Sandwich. But this is Heaven. This is translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd, and it contemplates the abstract concept of violence and picking on people who are perceived to be more vulnerable than you, more weak than you. We follow two children who are being bullied at school, and they find solidarity and peace and comfort in each other. They bring each other consolation when they need it most. And then the book contemplates what the nature of a relationship is when it's born out of terror, when it's born out of fear, and essentially having a common enemy rather than a common love. I found it absolutely enthralling. The fact that you can do so much with a book of that length is magical. Mieko Kawakami, I think, is one of the most exciting novelists of our generation. I'm so excited to see what she does next. Next, we have this insane little novel. This is Paradise by Fernanda Melchor. It was translated from Spanish by Sophie Hughes, and it's basically about this housing complex and two boys who live on it. And they feel really disaffected with their lives, and they're watching all these rich, wealthy people, and they believe that they are entitled to the things that those people have. And so they plot this little scheme, and the novel kind of builds up to this huge crescendo where they follow through with their plan, and it is shocking. Some of the language is disgusting and vile, but I could not put it down. The pages practically turn themselves. It just is, it builds up to that moment so brilliantly and powerfully, and then when it hits you right in the stomach. It's a sucker punch of a novel. It is unsparing, it is devastating, and there's this rage at the core of it. It's a study on Mexican society and race and class, but violence and rage are just searing off the pages in this book. It is amazing. And again, really, really short, a very quick read. I read this in one sitting because I could not put it down. So that is Paradise. Next, we have Simone de Beauvoir's The Woman Destroyed. This is translated from French, and the translator is Patrick O'Brien. Now, this is a collection of 3 short stories. The first one in this collection is one of the best short stories I have ever read in my entire life. It's about a woman whose son has left home and is marrying a woman that she does not like, and she basically wants to stop him from doing that. And each of the stories centers one woman who is facing a kind of crisis. And I think what Simone de Beauvoir does so well is she presents these women in a way where we do sympathize with them and we understand why they feel the way that they feel, whilst also not necessarily believing that they are in the right. And I think that is such a masterful thing to be able to achieve, for us to be able to look at them almost objectively and be like, yes, I understand why you are behaving in the way that you are, but it's not necessarily the way that you should be behaving, if that makes sense. And I think showing us the flaws in people's attitudes and approaches whilst also making us feel for them is genius. It's brilliant. And Simone de Beauvoir was huge in the kind of existentialist movement, hugely important feminist writer, and I just think this is wonderful. Also, how great are all of these book covers, by the way? Next one we have is Claudia Pinheiro's Elena Knows. I've spoken about this time and time again because this made me just absolutely sob. Again, like Paradise, this really builds up to a moment which just knocked the wind out of me completely, and I spent days recovering. It's a book I would sell my soul to read again for the very first time. I also have this customized bookmark for it, if you see that. It's sticking out. It was translated from the Spanish by Frances Riddle, and we follow a woman whose daughter has committed suicide, but she does not believe that her daughter would have done that. She doesn't believe her daughter would be capable of it, or that she would even want that for herself. And so she decides to investigate once the police have decided, you know, there's nothing suspicious about this suicide. She's like, damn right, there is something suspicious, and I'm gonna get to the bottom of it. And she has one person in mind who she wants to ask a question. It's about religious dogma and rhetoric. It's about the body and your relationship with your body when it fails you, when it becomes ill and plagued by suffering. It's about mother-daughter relationships. It's about trust. It's about communication. It's set in Argentina. And I think it really contemplates that moment that a lot of us have when we realize that someone in our life is more complicated than we've perhaps given them credit for. I think that Elena sees her daughter in a very one-dimensional way, and throughout the course of this book, she discovers that her daughter was multifaceted and was going through her own thing, or at least acknowledges that for the first time, and it just is magnificent. So emotional. Wow. Please, I'm jealous that some of you get to read this for the first time. The next book I picked up when I was in Croatia, and I would really highly recommend, if you do travel to a new place and you realize, I've never read a book from this country before, go to a bookstore, go to a local bookstore, ask the staff what books they recommend, and see if you can find something in translation. So that's what I did when I was in Croatia, and I picked up this book. It's called Wild Woman. It's by Marina Srpolovsky and translated by Kristina Pribicevic-Zoric, and it is so awesome. It's a kind of anti-love story in a way, and we kind of get the internal dialogue of this like manic woman, and she sort of feels like life is beginning to slip through her fingers a little bit, and in order to avoid that, she realizes that she needs to break free from the man that she has sort of dedicated a lot of her life to. And that is kind of what it means by wild woman. Like, she decides to go wild, and by wild it means going against the grain of what is expected of her. It's set against the backdrop of economic hardship in 1970s Croatia, and it's just a rollercoaster read, but so brilliant. Then we have Paradise Rot. This is by Jenny Wahl and translated by Marjam Idris from Norwegian. This book is vile and disgusting and weird and full of rotten fruit, rotting wood, a house that is crumbling around the character, and also urine, like pee is a massive motif in this book. It's about a woman who is looking for accommodation when she goes to university and ends up moving in with someone who lives in this kind of like warehouse, and they have this sexual chemistry with each other. There's also a guy who's one of their neighbors who gets involved, and the house is essentially rotting around her. It's kind of a quiet horror novel, and it's like when you see a car crash and you just can't look away from it. Like, it's so disgusting that it's kind of captivating at the same time. And I always think it's very impressive to be able to take words in black and white on a piece of paper and really make you feel vile. Next up, we have Cursed Bunny. This is by Bora Chung and translated by Anton He. It's a short story collection translated from Korean, and it truly is genre-defying, genre-bending. It includes every genre you can possibly imagine all in one book. The stories are weird and wacky and wonderful and just take you on an absolute ride through what fiction is capable of. At moments, it will shock you and surprise you, and at other moments, it will absolutely dazzle you, and a lot of moments, it will do both at the same time. This is really, really wonderful, and I love it. Next, I have two horror short story collections. So firstly, Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez. This is translated from Spanish by Megan McDowell. And then secondly, we have The House Guest, which is by Ampora de Villa, and this is translated from the Spanish by Audrey Harris and Matthew Gleason. Both of these collections are freaky and creepy and spooky, but also magnificent. There's a super varied mix of stories, and I would highly recommend both if you want to give yourself a little fright this August. I know it's only August, but that means it's 2 months until October. So get ahead of the game right now. Now, another short story collection is My Pen is the Wing of a Bird. This is a collection of short stories by Afghan women, and it's such a singular achievement. It's like a time capsule of a very specific time in Afghanistan, an anthology collection of just different stories about day-to-day life, what it is like, what the female experience is like in Afghanistan. At a moment in time where a collection like this is so vitally important, these voices are screaming to be heard, and the fact that they are all compiled in this collection is just so magical and brilliant. Each story is written and translated by someone different from both Dari and Pashto. So this is super intersectional and interesting and just so important to read. Next, I have Mona by Paula Oleixaro, and this is translated by Adam Morris. It's a story about a literary convention and a woman who goes to a place, and she's surrounded by writers who, let me just say, writers are the weirdest people you will ever meet. And I think this book really captures that, but it's also kind of surreal and crazy and very, how do I say this? Like, odd things occur in this book, but it also grapples with some really important subjects. It talks about substance abuse, set in this small village in Sweden where authors from all around the world, mostly male, I will say, they come to this village and strange things occur there. So some really interesting interactions happen, and I thought this was great. And finally, we have I Who Have Never Known Men. This is by Jacqueline Hartman and translated from French by Ross Schwartz, and it also has an introduction by Sophie McIntosh. This is a book about a woman who has been living in this kind of underground bunker with a bunch of women, 39 to be exact, and for the first time, the women are able to leave the bunker. And so it's about this one central protagonist who has only ever known life in the bunker, basically being introduced to the world around her and discovering things for the very first time. The women create this community. It's a very fascinating study, and I think that you will enjoy it. So those are my picks for this month. I hope that you enjoy. As I said, I will leave the link to the video by Books and Bowl down below where they talk about a lot of new releases as well. That's definitely where I'm going to be taking my recommendations for this month from. But for now, thank you so much for watching this video. All the best, stay in touch, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you very, very soon. Goodbye!